What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing terrifying encounters had in cornfields. When pondering once again the fact that you guys seem to really enjoy videos about encounters with strange and oftentimes terrifying creatures and beings in the woods, I came across something that is perhaps, at least to some of us, just as, if not even more frightening, and that's encounters with these same unknown creatures, kind of, but in allegedly haunted cornfields. I don't know about you all, but I've been in my fair share of cornfields, and even without a creepy encounter to go along with it, the experience of simply being in one of these fields in the dark, even when you aren't alone, is a mystifying and somewhat very eerie experience. In almost all of the encounters I've recently come across, the entities encountered are evil, malicious, or malevolent in some way, and even when they aren't, they're still scary as hell. Let's jump right in, shall we? On US Route 40, approximately 25 miles west of Indianapolis, our first witness was driving past a large and seemingly never-ending row of cornfields when he had his strange encounter. It was just about midnight, and he stated, quote, "Anyone who drives that way knows that that route is just miles and miles of cornfields. And since it was a very routine drive and a summer drive, I was spending more time looking out the window for deer than anything else. In searching for deer, I caught some eye shine and slowed down to about 35 miles per hour, but I noticed that the shine I saw was a more of orange, fiery color than normal for a deer. As I got to within about 30 yards, I could see it wasn't a deer producing the eye shine, but a strange gray mass sitting at the edge of the cornfield just before a tree line. When I got about 20 yards, it stood up. I was still confused as to exactly what I was looking at until it stood up all the way, and it was only about 8 feet outside of my passenger window. It looked like a gray, emaciated man dressed like he was in the Great Depression era suit with a brown fedora, with fire instead of eyes and nothing for a face. He looked to be about 8 feet tall, and it just felt like he was staring into my skull. And as he started to pass behind me, I watched him turn and casually step back into the cornfield and vanish." End quote. What in the actual F word did this guy actually come across that night? Because I'm sure I don't know, and I'm even more sure that I don't want to know. Our next encounter comes from Illinois, also in the United States. Our witness is a woman who said she and her husband were driving down an extremely isolated, narrow, and dark stretch of road that traversed directly through 2 cornfields, one on each side. It was a bright and clear night, and she was sitting in the passenger seat of the vehicle and was starting to become a little bit entranced by the passing of the same stalks of corn for Lord knows how many miles on end, when suddenly something would happen that would jolt them both almost right out of their seats. She explained of the incident, quote, "Something ran across the road in front of me. It was about the size of a toddler, but it looked like a skeleton, or so skinny its limbs were about the size of a skeleton's. It was also bone white and very fast. I have been through college. I have a Bachelor of Science and have taken biology classes as well as zoology. That creature was something I've never seen or come across before. My husband looked ahead just as it left the road and said he just saw something but couldn't describe it." End quote. What in the world was this thing? Though I certainly have my ideas, I'm sure I don't know absolutely, and somewhat unsurprisingly, this isn't the only report of a pale creature like this lurking about in the cornfields, and not by a long shot, as is evidenced in some small way by our next encounter. In the state of Minnesota in the summer of 2004, our next witness, who we will call Jason, says he was working in a cheese factory in a very rural and desolate area. In fact, Jason said the factory itself sat right up along a huge and very vast expanse of nothing but cornfields that seemed to stretch on forever, or at least much further than the eye could see. Jason was taking his break while working the night shift and stepped outside to get some fresh air, or maybe he was going to smoke a cigarette, who knows, but he stepped outside. However, he said as he watched the bats flit and fly around and about, something much more strange and unholy caught his eye. Quote, "As I was watching the bats, I looked down at the edge of the cornfield. Something was moving there. It was the size of a small child and very, very, very skinny. Pale, with something that looked like a head of straight black hair. It moved in a sort of jerky gait, like someone dancing the robot badly. It moved in chunks, legs, then hips, then torso, then shoulders, neck, and finally head. It was looking back into the cornfields, or at least I felt like it was. I was prickly all over. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a heron or something at first, but it looked too much like a person. It didn't move like a person though. Gradually, step by step, it was moving toward me. Letting my curiosity better my fear, I moved toward the edge of the dock, which was raised a few feet off of the ground. When I got within a few feet of the edge, the thing looked at me. I was paralyzed. I could have run, but I was stuck somewhere between terrified and intrigued. It moved, its face still pointed at me. It ratcheted its body in that disconcerting, jerky movement toward the cornfield and went into it. I tried to watch where the field moved as it passed, but the corn remained perfectly still. I noticed that all the crickets were silent. After a few minutes, nothing happened. I stood out there for an hour, but it never came back. I never saw it again, end quote. So what are these things? I feel like with all of my research into so many different things as I go through article after article, source after source, and encounter after encounter, I'm coming across pale beings almost exactly like these, or at least very similar. I've long ago made the connection more and more these days. Where are they all suddenly coming from? Or again, is it something that's just being reported more now? Even when compared to 2 years ago when I started this journey, the encounters with pale night entities have been happening a lot more. I recently covered pale crawlers and have a video coming up solely covering more strange, pale, and terrifying humanoid beings. It's horrifying based on the descriptions given by witnesses alone, let alone try to actually sit here and wrap my mind around the fact that it's all real and it's all really happening at a somewhat alarming rate too. So many unknowns, too many if you ask me. So our next one seems to be a bit more demonic, or at least more evil in nature, and it's literally what my nightmares are made of, guys. Our witness's name is Jessie, and she was living in what she described as, quote, a modest house in Indiana, end quote, when she had her horrifying ordeal involving something pale and strange and downright evil in the cornfields surrounding her home. The house sat atop a very large hill and was surrounded by acre after acre of cornfield, which were surrounded by even more acres of more woods. Actually, it sounds like one of my dream homes, but that's neither here nor there. Jessie said that the house and the surrounding areas around it were scary as it was, but what was about to happen next would strike a terror and fear into her heart, which penetrated her very core and from which she could never quite recover from. She's still messed up to this day. So she decided to take a hike through the cornfields and into the woods, which was something she did often, despite the overall eeriness of the situation. The hike went perfectly normal until she started making her way back to the house. That's when things took a turn for the possibly demonic. Jessie stated of the incident, quote, I was walking back and I caught a fast flash of something all black move behind a tree in the woods. I stopped and looked, and at first I didn't see anything, so I began walking again, but after a few steps, I seen it again, and this time it didn't hide. What I saw that day was not only unexplainable, it was pure evil in a form. It stood there looking at me, and its head and neck hung to the side in a very abnormal way, as if it was broken. It stood about 4 feet tall, and its arms were very long and hung all the way to the ground. It looked as if its entire body was burned or very, thick skin, and it had no hair or ears on its head. Then I noticed that steam was rolling off of this thing like crazy, and it then let out this loud scream that scared me so badly I began to run full speed through the field toward the house. I felt as if my heart was going to beat right out of my chest, and I could hear the leaves crunching as this thing was definitely coming after me, end quote. I don't know if this was an actual demon or maybe some lost soul that died in a fire or something. I would have to get into my ideas on hell, and I don't want to do that for this video, but it could have been something hellish, I guess, or someone who died a hellish death and hasn't crossed over and keeps appearing in their death mask, which can be something that's really, really terrifying to someone who doesn't see it all the time, because as someone who does see it all the time, it's really, really terrifying. Or it could have been a demon that was purposely trying to scare her, playing off her fears. Whatever it was, I don't want to meet one in the dark or really during the daytime either, anywhere. So just putting it out there. Our next witness's name is Emily, and she was visiting a friend one night whose house was smack dead center in the middle of and surrounded by, on all sides, you guessed it, woods and cornfields. Emily said, ironically enough, that her friend was also terrified of the cornfields around her house, or rather scared of what was in the cornfields surrounding her house. The friend believed they were overcome with malevolent entities, evil demonic forces, and malicious creatures, even claiming to have seen such entities on more than just a few occasions. Emily said she had paid no mind to her friend's fears and encounter stories until one night they were out for a drive through the property. Emily said, quote, my friend has always had a fear of cornfields, and no matter how many times I ask her, she refuses to tell me why. Her husband did tell me that it's because of something called corn demons. On this particular night, she wanted to visit her mom since we were going to be nearby. Her mom still lives in the same house that my friend grew up in, which is in a heavily wooded area by a lake out in the country. As we were leaving, she turned and we started driving past a cornfield. I was about to comment on how high the corn was when my friend suddenly smacked my leg. "Do not look into the corn." She sounded very serious, but despite myself, I glanced over. There were a pair of red eyes in the corn, but since she was driving so fast, it was only for a split second. I had to stop myself from saying anything, but I had a feeling she knew anyway, just because of how fast she drove to get past the field and how she remained silent up until we were a good mile or two ahead of it. I know what I saw, but at the same time, I don't. I have no idea what it could have been, end quote. While most of the encounters of this kind I've come across have had to do with those pale things or other entities who are unknown to us but definitely evil, there were some involving general ghosts and spirits, as general as they can be, right? They were encounters with lost souls or spirits in general who, for one reason or another, are doomed and roaming these desolate and lonely fields at night. Our next witness is recounting an encounter told to her by her husband, who had been out among some cornfields fishing with 3 buddies. She said, quote, "So one day he was meeting his friends to go fishing on the river. His 3 friends were already down by the water and he got there later with his dog. The river in town is separated by a cornfield, so they just had to park their cars by the road, walk through the fields, and then they were at the riverbank. Now, this happened in 2006 when our town had a bad flood. This was also late summer, so the corn was really high. Half of the cornfield had been flooded, so the part by the road was still standing, but when you got farther out, it had been leveled by the flood. Anyway, he said he had this awful feeling while he was walking through the corn and his dog kept barking. This dog is extremely well behaved, but wouldn't stop even after my husband told him to. He said he felt really uneasy, but brushed it off because it was a short walk, and then he emerged from the corn and walked the rest of the way to his friends. When he got down to the river, he said his friends asked who it was that was walking with him. He said no one and asked what were they talking about. Well, I guess their faces turned white, and they explained that a man walked out of the corn with him and then just turned around and walked back into the corn. He said he was sure they were serious and felt certain that a ghost was walking with him, and that's why he got the feeling he got and why his dog was acting so strange, end quote. Weird. Our last encounter also leans toward the very paranormal, and I would love to hear what you all think of this one and the others in the comments below, so don't forget to leave me your thoughts, please. Our final witness for this video was driving with a few friends in Illinois on their way to Chicago. They were on a remote, expansive road on I-55 that passed right through an innumerable number of cornfields on either side of them. It seemed to go on forever and almost like they would never reach normal roads or any type of proper civilization ever again. Who doesn't know this feeling, right guys? You're up late at night and you're driving around for whatever reason when you suddenly are aware of just how small you are and the general creepiness of Mother Nature at that hour in really any part of the world you happen to be in at that time. Am I right? Our witness described something very odd and said, quote, "It was really late and everyone was asleep in the van except my friend's mom and I. I was sitting on the right side in the back when we passed by what looked like 2 teenagers coming out of the cornfield on the right side of the road. Now, normally in this area, that's not too weird. Plenty of kids end up wandering through cornfields at some point in Illinois. What was weird was where they were and how they looked. I will never forget the boy. He was probably 15 or 16 years old, wearing a white linen shirt and brown pants with suspenders. His hair was short but curly and brown. He was handsome and pale, with dark circles under his eyes. And I mean like Gerard Way looking eyes." Who's Gerard Way? "He even looked like he had blood on him, and the girl he was with looked bad. She was wearing a blood-covered dress, and she was also pale with dark rings under her eyes. Now, where we were was really strange. That cornfield was huge, and there weren't any entrances off of I-55 that we could see. My friend's mom immediately freaked out, thinking they drove their car into the cornfield and must have been super hurt. We were driving pretty fast, and she had a van full of kids, so instead of pulling over, she grabbed her Nokia and called 911. I remember that she reported the mile marker and told the police they looked like they needed help, and that was it. I never figured out what happened. I honestly think they were ghosts. Their movements were so strange, and their placement was just odd. There is no way teenagers would be hanging out on the side of I-55 dressed like that at around midnight," end quote. I don't know. I'm not from Illinois, but I don't know, like, the fact that they had blood on them would probably strike me as more odd than where they were, but that's just me. So I ask you, I posit this to you. Was this my most beloved and sought out creature of the night, my beloved and lovely vampire? Sounds a little bit like it to me, and I've been wondering if these other pale entities could be one and the same, only they were turned wrong or had something else either wrong with them or go wrong during the transformation. I mean, you're not supposed to make them that young, right? Where they can't, like, care for themselves, meaning where they can't, like, by alcohol, I guess. I don't know. You can't be a miner and a vampire, or at least you're not supposed to be. So kind of makes me wonder. I don't know. I have no clue. What do you guys think? That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this content, hanging out with me, and spending this time going over these crazy, creepy, horrible, horrifying, weird encounters with me. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please check out the description box for some important links, how to donate to the channel, PayPal, Patreon, Cash App, and Varo, and my Amazon wish list gift links. Thank you so much for donations, guys, as though that is how I make my money as of right now. My business is coming, not making any more promises. It took a long time, and I filmed a couple videos just now, so like I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I guess I'm kind of not. It's just taking some time to get it exactly how I wanted and to get the schedule with the person who's helping me build it, because I only need available nights, they're only available days, I'm available weekends, they're not. It's taking a while, but it's going to be super awesome. If you want to order something or want to know about what I do, I did leave a short video in the description box, but I've since started adding some things to my collection, like the spiritual helper boxes and the gemstone oil rollers, moon water, sun water, tar water, all that kind of stuff. So hit me up, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com or MoonBearOracle@gmail.com if you'd like a personal intuitive oracle reading, either remote or 1 hour via some kind of video chat. Hit me up for that as well at one of the email addresses, which you can also find in the description box. And come and join me and Ghost Dragon ZW on Wednesday nights from 7:15 to 11:15, 11:30-ish Eastern time, where I pull one random oracle card and give whoever's in there, first come, first serve, come one, come all, a weekly reading with that card. If we run out of readings, I usually just end it right there. So if you're getting there at like 10:45 Eastern and we're not there, that's why. It's only because we ran out of readings, nothing else. Guys, be kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger, and I'll see you next time. Mwah. Bye.